my channel and welcome to another video. So Easter is right around the corner. It'll be here before we know it. So I thought it would be fun in this video to share with you 4 awesome Easter side dishes. So these side dishes can really go with any meal you're having. They're so good and easy to make, but they go really well with an Easter dinner, especially if you're having an Easter ham. These recipes came from my husband's side of the family. He grew up eating them. They've kind of been passed down. Some of these recipes are his grandmother's recipes, and then his mom's been making them. And then she gave them to me along with many others. She put together a recipe box for me back when we got married, and she filled it with all of their favorite recipes, especially my husband's. And it was the sweetest gift, and I love that box. I've been using so many recipes out of it, especially these ones. So I really hope you enjoy this video. With all that said, let's go get started.
First recipe we're going to make is one of my favorite dishes to make for the holidays, and it's potatoes au gratin. I've had potatoes au gratin many times, but nothing compares to this recipe. It is so good, and every time I make it, everybody always raves about it. So here's everything you're going to need for this recipe. You're going to need some potatoes, butter, flour, milk, cheddar cheese, which sharp cheddar is the best, but you can also do medium cheddar, that's good too, some salt and pepper, ground mustard, and then paprika. So the first thing I needed to do was just get my potatoes ready. So I'm kind of just giving them a rough cleaning because I'm going to peel them. So next I'll be peeling, and I'm just making this recipe for my family this night. So it's just 4 of us. So there's 2 adults and 2 kids. So I did a little bit extra because I like to have leftovers. So I roughly kind of go about a potato a person for this recipe. The recipe I'm sharing down below in the description is for about 8 to 10 people. I just cut my potatoes into good sized cubes, and then I got them into a large pot and I added in water, and then I put in a generous amount of salt, and I got that onto my stovetop to start heating up over medium to high heat. And I'm just bringing the water to a boil and then cooking my potatoes until they're tender and soft. So while my potatoes were cooking, I just got started on my sauce. So I shredded my cheese for this recipe. I like to always shred my cheese when I'm cooking with it because the pre-shredded cheese that you get from the grocery store changes the consistency and the texture of the sauce for this recipe, and it doesn't come out right because of the additives in it. So shredding your own cheese when making any kind of cheese sauce is the way to go. So the best type of cheese for this recipe, like I said earlier, is sharp cheddar. However, the store didn't have that when I was getting everything for this recipe. So I ended up getting medium cheddar, and it always still turns out good, but sharp cheddar is the best. So I shredded about 2 cups of cheese and I set it aside. Next, I got my large skillet over medium to high heat, and I added in about 2 tablespoons of butter, and I melted that down. Then I just added in 2 tablespoons of flour, and I whisked that just for a few. And then I slowly added in 1 cup of milk while whisking it. And then I added in a 1/4 teaspoon of dry mustard, a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and a 1/4 teaspoon of pepper, and I gave it all a good mix. And next I just added in 2 cups of shredded cheese, and I melted that down, and then I added in just a little bit of milk, a couple tablespoons, just to get the cheese sauce to the consistency that I wanted. So once my potatoes were done, I drained them, and then I got my 9x13 casserole dish out, and I sprayed it with some cooking spray, and then I just layered the potatoes at the bottom of the dish, and then I poured some of my cheese sauce all over the potatoes, and then I just repeated this until there wasn't any more potatoes or cheese sauce. And then lastly, I just sprinkle a little bit of paprika right on top. So these will bake in the oven at 350 degrees for about 30 minutes, but usually I make these a day or 2 ahead of time for whichever holiday or event I'm making them for, and then I will cover them with foil and put them in my fridge, and then the day of, I just take them out about 45 minutes to an hour ahead of time, and I'll just leave them on my counter to bring them down to room temperature so they're not so cold, and then they won't take too long to cook in the oven. So these seriously are the best potatoes au gratin. I got this from my mother-in-law, this recipe years ago, and I was so excited when she gave it to me because I remember eating these the very first time when I started dating my husband, and I fell in love with this recipe. These are so good, cheesy, and delicious, and everybody always raves about them. The next recipe I have to share with you is the strawberry Jello salad. So this is definitely a side dish that I pair with my Easter dinner, but it can also be made as a dessert. It's super easy to make. It only requires 5 ingredients. So here's everything you're going to need. You're going to need an 8-ounce container of Cool Whip. I'm showing the larger one here. I grabbed the wrong one out of my freezer, so definitely the smaller one. You're going to need a can of crushed pineapple, a box of strawberry Jello, a jar of maraschino cherries, and 1 banana. So the very first thing I needed to do was get my Jello salad ready to go and into the fridge because it was going to take a while to set up. So I just followed the directions on the back of the box, got everything into my bowl, and then covered and into my fridge. So once my Jello salad had set up, I was ready to add everything else in. So I added in 1 8-ounce container of Cool Whip, and then I got my can of crushed pineapple open. I drained out as much of the liquid as I could, and then I added that in and gave it a good mix. And then I got about a half a jar of maraschino cherries and I gave them a good rough chop before adding them into the bowl. So you really could do any amount of cherries that you want to put into this dish. You could put a whole jar in if you want. It's going to be good no matter what. And lastly, I just sliced up my banana and added it into the bowl and gave it a good mix before dishing it up. So I just want to point out with the banana, you want to make sure to slice it and add it in just before serving it. And then I just transfer it into a pretty bowl before dishing it up. This Jello salad is always so good. It's light, it's fluffy and sweet. It's the perfect Easter side dish to go with that dinner ham. Everybody always loves it, and I hardly have any leftovers at the end. It's always a hit. So the next recipe I have to share with you is, of course, green bean casserole. You can't have an Easter dinner without this one. So this one only requires 5 ingredients as well. So here's everything you're going to need. You're going to need some fresh green beans, some fried onions, a can of cream of celery soup, and then salt and pepper. So first I just needed to get my green beans ready to go. So I like to buy the bags of already prepped and washed green beans. It's just so easy doing it that way. But I like to break them up before adding them into my saucepan. And then once I get them all in, I add in some water and I get them onto my stovetop to bring them to a boil and just cook them for a few because I will be adding these into the oven at the end. So once my green beans had come to a boil, I only cook them for about 3 to 4 minutes and then I drain them immediately and I transfer them to an ice bath just to stop the cooking process. So after the green beans had sat in the ice bath for just a few, I transferred them to a large bowl where I added in 1 can of cream of celery soup. So I know what you're probably thinking. You're probably wondering why I'm adding in cream of celery and not cream of mushroom, because I know cream of mushroom is the go-to soup for this recipe usually for a lot of people. But my mother-in-law doesn't like cream of mushroom soup, and when she started making this recipe, she added in cream of celery and she's been doing it ever since. And when I tasted it and found out that was her secret ingredient, I've been doing it as well, and it always turns out so good. Next, I added in about a half a cup of these fried onions. So I love these things. They're pretty addicting to me, so I always put in extra, but you really could add in anywhere from a quarter cup to a half a cup. And then I just gave a good pinch of salt and pepper as well. And lastly, I just add in about a tablespoon or 2 of some milk. I give it a good mix before transferring it into my casserole dish. So after I got it transferred into my casserole dish, I gotta add more of these delicious fried onions on top. So I just like to put about a quarter of a cup or so on top before I get it into the oven. And then I just get these into my oven at 350 degrees and I bake them for about 25 to 30 minutes just until they're hot and bubbly. So these do really well making them ahead of time, just like the potatoes. So I usually make these about a day or two before Easter. I'll cover them with foil when I'm done and I'll put them in my fridge. And then the day of, I just take them out about 30 to 45 minutes before I need to put them in the oven to bring them down in room temperature so they're not so cold. And then I'll finish them off by baking them for about 30 minutes. These always turn out so good. The fresh green beans is really where it's at, along with that cream of celery soup. They're always a hit and we never have any leftovers when we make these. So the last dish I have to share with you is simple, but it definitely doesn't skip out on flavor. It's a strawberry almond spinach salad. Here's everything you're going to need for this side dish. You'll need some fresh spinach, some sliced almonds, some fresh strawberries, onion powder, sesame seeds, poppy seeds, sugar, white vinegar, olive oil, and Worcestershire sauce. So first I started out by preheating my oven at 350 degrees so I can toast my almonds. So whenever I use any type of nuts in my recipes, most of the time I like to toast them just to enhance the flavors. So I got a small baking sheet covered with some foil and I poured about a quarter cup of sliced almonds onto it and I set it aside just to wait for my oven to heat up. Next, I moved on to get my salad dressing ready. So I got a medium-sized mixing bowl and I added in a quarter cup of sugar, a quarter cup of olive oil, 2 tablespoons of white vinegar, 1 teaspoon of onion powder, a few dashes of Worcestershire sauce, 1 tablespoon of poppy seeds, and 1 tablespoon of sesame seeds, and I gave it all a good mix. And then once my oven was preheated, I got my almonds in and I toasted them for about 5 minutes. And then I moved on to get my strawberries sliced up. So I sliced up about 8 medium-sized strawberries, but the amount of strawberries that you want in the salad is really up to you. I just like a good amount, so I added in about 3/4 of a cup or so, maybe a little bit more. I then got my fresh spinach and I gave it a good rough chop. I really don't like the large spinach leaves in this salad, so I like to kind of chop it up roughly. And then once I was done with that, I added the spinach to my salad bowl and then I added in my strawberries. I then added in my cooled sliced almonds, and then next I poured in my homemade dressing right on top. And then I just took my tongs and I gave it all a good mix before I dished it up. So this salad combo is definitely a non-traditional salad, but it is so good and delicious and fresh. The flavors complement each other so well, and it's the perfect spring salad and great Easter side dish. Alright guys, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you make any of these side dishes for your Easter dinner, I hope you love them just as much as me and my family. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe down below. I would love to have you. I hope you all have a wonderful Easter if you celebrate, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!